okay, let's go ahead and math this out. Even if Social Security benefits do get cut, most households should not claim early out of fear. The math says that even if benefits get cut, most people would be better off with at least some delay in their household than they would be claiming early to get money out of this shrinking pot of money.
Welcome into Impactful Conversations, stories and lessons for financial advisors. I'm your host, Dave Edgecombe. Joining me in the hot seat, we got a familiar face. We're bringing back Joe Elsasser, founder of Covisum and also a financial advisor himself. Today, we're going to talk about sort of the significance of Social Security and how it impacts tax planning and why that makes for a more holistic financial practice and why they're so important and why it's something that you guys have prioritized in your practice and what Covisum now does for other financial advisors as well. So I think it's a lot of good stuff. We're going to cover a lot. We're going to cover Social Security. In our previous podcast that we've done with Joe, we talked about the Social Security Fairness Act. That's a deep dive. I would recommend when you're done here, take a look at that. Always like and subscribe if you want to stay up on the latest and greatest from Impactful Conversations and all the other stuff that we have on our Impact Partnership YouTube channel. But before we can get into all of that, I need to know a little bit more about how Joe wound up in our hot seat in our cold room, because this is a very cold room for whatever reason, but how you wound up in our hot seat. So tell the people kind of, I guess, let's start with Covisum and how that kind of came to be and maybe a little bit about what kind of resource it can be for a financial advisor.
Sure. Just rewinding way back, I was starting a financial planning practice and said, actually, I had started with one of the life insurance-based financial planning shops out there when I was 20 and promptly flunked out. A year and a half in, I'm out. I stayed in the industry and ultimately got to see a bunch of different advisors with really strong practices that actually were doing what I thought I was signing up to do, which was become a financial planner. And when I really took a step back and said, how do I want my practice to look? I wanted to add real value. I wanted to add quantifiable value. I didn't want to commoditize every personal relationship I had. And so we said, the hardest problem, the hardest challenge to overcome is this idea of momentum. It's people are going to do whatever they're doing until they're forced into a choice. And when I say forced into a choice, they come to milestones in life where they have to make a decision. And Social Security was one of those. When someone becomes Medicare eligible is another. The RMDs is another. Yep. There's this host of decisions that people have to make. So we said, okay, which of those decisions can we add the most value to? And Social Security was at the top of that list. And so ultimately I started building Social Security spreadsheets to say, is there a better way to answer this question? And of course, if you rewind to 2009, 2010, restricted application, file and suspend, those were options at the time, and there was no software that coordinated all of those options. So that's how I started in software. It was really out of necessity, right? I needed a tool to know that I had analyzed all the options, that I was answering the questions better, and that tool didn't exist. So that's what started us on the path. Now, of course, if you spend any time on Social Security, you notice how weird the taxation is, right? You got to go off the 1040 into the instructions, fill out a worksheet before you know how much to put on the 1040 of a Social Security benefit. So tax was the next place we went.
So that kind of was a natural progression for you, that you dug in on Social Security and was like, well, I can't do this right if I'm not going to focus on the tax planning component of it as well.
Yeah. And actually it was our users. So our users at the time were like, listen, you've already got all the Social Security cash flows built out. Why don't you build out a retirement income tool that just has all the other cash flows? It's like, well, because really the total amount of income that's hitting the front door, that's not the answer. The answer is, how much can I spend? How much can I actually live on? So if all my withdrawals are from IRAs, obviously that's very different than if all my income is Social Security. I can spend a lot more if it's also Social Security or Roth withdrawals or any number of tax-advantaged kind of opportunities. So what we really wanted to focus on is what's the after-tax net spendable amount of income that's coming into the household. And funny enough, I started building tax clarity with the intent of using it as the engine under this overall retirement income planning software. But at the end of 2015, coming into 16, all the Social Security rules changed. File and suspend, out the door. Restricted application, out the door. And so we had to launch a new product, right? And so we ended up launching Tax Clarity, figuring, okay, this is not the entirety of what we'll build, but it gives us the opportunity to start to teach advisors about these interactions between different income types. And if you rewind to then, that was not a topic of conversation. It was not a core topic. Hey, we've got to watch out for capital gains taxation. We didn't even have to worry about, IRMA in the way we do today. So that was released really to get the conversation started. And ultimately, it became Income Insight that we ended up coming out with in 2020.
Well, I know in your practice, you guys have really prioritized Social Security so much so that leads your 3 steps to a tax-efficient retirement. I mean, that is the first thing that you are dealing with when it comes to any client or prospect that comes through your door.
Yeah, absolutely. And the biggest reason is because the vast majority of people have to make a Social Security decision. So we want to add value there. And it's really easy to add value by identifying an optimal strategy. But funny enough, when Social Security makes up a larger portion of a client's overall retirement income, we have the ability to create a whole lot more tax efficiency with their other assets. And we also have this gap from 62 to 70, where oftentimes once someone stops working, we have complete flexibility on what actually lands on the tax return. So we talk a lot about the idea of retirement is, people don't get there with a nest egg. They get there with a carton. And my job as an advisor is to help them decide which eggs to break today, which eggs to save for tomorrow and later on in retirement. It really gets down to which accounts am I going to spend from at which points in time. So the 3 steps is start with Social Security, because it's got value on its own, but it also has value in the form of tax efficiency. Mm-hmm. The second step is account strategy. It's which account do I use at which points in time? Am I using my IRA early, or am I using my Roth early? Am I using my taxable account, my brokerage account, my CDs, etc.? Which accounts do I use? And then the third steps, once I know when I'm going to use the accounts, then I can fill those accounts with appropriate product. But funny enough, it sounds really simple and dumb, but it's unbelievable how many advisors start with product. And because they start with product, they end up putting product in the wrong accounts that actually keeps the client from being able to achieve tax efficiency.
I know Social Security is so near and dear to your heart that it gets you fired up. I'm aware of that. You reference our first podcast that we did with Joe to kind of get the full scope of that. But any conversation that you have about Social Security, especially with a client or prospect, does it have to start with the insolvency concerns?
It's definitely got to be a part of the discussion. When I started doing this, 2009, 2010, I was doing library seminars, and I was literally able to say to people, then the projected insolvency date, if you will, was 2043. In the first, it was 2043 then. So I could literally say to my seminar audience, more than half of you in the room will be dead by then. It's not something you should worry about.
Yeah.
You can't say that anymore, right? No. Change will happen during the time of the clients that are retiring today. It'll happen during their lifetime. We don't know what that change will look like, but we've got to be prepared for it. And if there isn't a legislative change, then we've got to be prepared for what would the impact of a benefit cut be on me? Would my financial plan in total still be okay? And if it wouldn't, we've got decisions to make. We might want to constrain lifestyle a little now, just to make that pain less later if it did materialize. We might want to work longer. Variety of different options.
What does insolvency even mean in this scenario? Because I thought it meant, okay, there's nothing in the bowl anymore.
Right.
But that's not really what it means, right?
Right. So when you think about Social Security, we've got tax revenues that are continually coming into the system. And those tax revenues, even if we ran out of trust funds, right? Congress doesn't do anything, trust fund gets to zero, then current tax receipts, Social Security tax receipts, would be enough to fund just under 80% of scheduled benefits. Okay, so somewhere between a 20 and 25% benefit cut would happen across the board for all beneficiaries if Congress does not take any action.
I fear that a financial advisor sees this podcast, sees the subject of Social Security and thinks, click, I don't care about Social Security because I'm trying to capture high net worth clients and they don't care about Social Security. It's not important to them. You're here to tell me that that's not correct.
Yeah, not at all.
Well, I mean,
I was on the horn with an advisor. She actually had worked in the high net worth section for, I think it was JP Morgan, private bank. And she's like, I couldn't believe how fired up these people that are worth $100, $200 million plus would get over Social Security. She's like, and then when I thought about it, a lot of them had started businesses. They had paid both halves of the Social Security tax, so self-employment tax. They're seeing 15% of their dollars go into this system. Yeah, they want to get everything they can out of the system. Absolutely. It matters even to high net worth people.
Just so we're talking apples and apples, because I've since learned that that's a very subjective term when you say high net worth. I mean, what is that in your practice? What's that box checked? What does that look like?
So my financial planning practice, we don't focus on high net worth. We focus on what we consider the mass affluent and actually what you might call the lower end of the high net worth. So our typical client has somewhere between $500,000 and $5 million. So that kind of slides into the bottom of the higher net worth. But we typically we'll have an $8 or $10 million client who has some of the more exotic things. They might own commercial real estate. They might own, closely held businesses. Those aren't our wheelhouse. We actually refer those clients away. Believe it or not, a lot of advisors look at me and they're like, you're crazy. But the reason we do that is because we are exceptional for the kind of client that we can serve really well. And that's that, 500 to 5 million who really just want to be able to be confident in their retirement. They want to have a clear picture and they want to know they're doing it in a way that's efficient from a tax perspective, that they're not leaving dollars on the table.
If anything, I'm trying to make Social Security sexy again.
Because it was at one point?
It could have been. I don't know.
Sure.
Predates me a little bit, so maybe we'll imagine that it was. And Social Security as a seminar topic. Now, I know outright probably not. Yeah, maybe it shouldn't be the headliner. We are only going to talk about Social Security in this dinner seminar, Ruth Chris. Probably not a winning recipe. But how are you treating Social Security in your guys' seminars and how are you broaching it?
So for us, it was never, even when I started Social Security timing, it was never just here are the Social Security rules. It was always, and here's how Social Security starts to translate into the rest of your financial plan. So from day one, there was a point in our Social Security seminar that's been used by literally thousands of advisors, that went through the taxation of Social Security and, more importantly, how it plays with IRA withdrawals alongside it. Because when you have a higher concentration of Social Security income, you can create just really tax efficient overall income streams. And so we always started there because the idea that I might, as a consumer, that I might spend my own money to delay Social Security, that was a painful idea. And that's an idea we had to address right out of the gates. And there are big tax advantages to doing so.
One component of this marketing sort of discussion when it comes to Social Security is how it lends itself to sort of spinning the referral wheel. I know in our pre-call you said your guys' practice about 10% was referrals. And this concept of being a holistic practice so that you are factoring in Social Security and then the other hand, you're factoring in tax planning and you are sort of this one-stop shop and it lends itself to a happier client. Happier clients are great. Happier clients refer other people. And by your guys' metrics, you believe in the client lifespan, they'll refer 2 people to you. So by being a holistic practice and offering Social Security and tax planning and factoring all of it in, it can 3x your practice.
Yeah, the value of a client, which means that I can actually spend a little more to get the good client that is a great fit for our practice, because I know that there's a high likelihood that I'm not just getting that one client. I'm getting that one client plus one or two more, maybe five more for some, because our services are a perfect fit for what they're after. One of the other things we do, I don't know if I mentioned the net promoter score.
I don't think so.
Yeah, so when we started Adaptive Advice, we said, okay, net promoter score is this really cool way of gauging customer satisfaction. And a 80 is considered a world-class business. A 50 is an excellent business. We targeted a 70. The last 3 years in a row, we had 100, 100, 100. That's absolutely unheard of. It can't continue forever, but it's a really good way of measuring where you're at on that referability spectrum.
So Impact CEO Stephen Odom, shout out Stephen Odom. He is big on motivation, and when we do our Monday morning meeting, he's given us some sort of nugget. And to start the year, he told us that his word for the year was intentional. Be intentional in everything that you do. It strikes home to me because that's something I preach all the time in the videos that we make, and being intentional and not just shooting someone on green screen just for the sake of shooting it on green screen. It's what's the purpose? Why are we doing it this way? And you wrote an article for, help me out. What was the article that I'm about to reference?
Probably Advisor Perspectives.
Bing, ding, 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 okay. Ding. That would be the one. And you spoke about intentional decisions and what that means for a practice and why it's so important for a financial advisor to be intentional. Why is it so important?
Well, I mean, that's what I just described, this idea of creating a practice that specifically appeals to a certain type of client, because that practice is much more able to scale going forward. You're much more able to find more of the same client when you've built out a service platform that thrills them. Right? All those come down to decisions that you make on the front end. Intentionality is really this idea that anything I do, I am actually choosing not to do several other things. Oh, right?
It's an interesting way of looking at it, but yeah.
So if I just meander into something, what I've actually done is chosen not to do several other things that I could have done. And when I think about building a practice, front and center is, which clients am I not going to take? Which clients will consume a disproportionate amount of time? And for us, it's that high net worth client that does have a lot of different things going on. We can't be excellent to them because it means we have to relearn a whole bunch of different new things for each of those unique situations. Where instead, when we focus on our target, we're actually looking for a shared set of concerns as we identify our core client.
When you talk about Social Security with a prospect, are you starting that conversation out of fear, scaring them? What are you going to do if it becomes insolvent?
We don't. For me, and if you Google me, you'll see I'm out there a lot trying to allay that fear, actually, because I hate the clickbait headline, Social Security's going broke. It causes people to make decisions.
Mental note, we won't label the video that. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
It causes people to make decisions that are bad for them, right? Where if I can be a voice of reason that says, okay, let's go ahead and math this out. Even if Social Security benefits do get cut, most households should not claim early out of fear. The math says that even if benefits get cut, most people would be better off with at least some delay in their household than they would be claiming early to get money out of this shrinking pot of money.
I'm big on phrasing things so that they have mass appeal and so that they look nice. And, I want to click that. And you're hating on my clickbait, but over here, I'm trying to make clickbait. I'm trying to get clicks over here. Like and subscribe, please. Please. We need it. Something we talked about in our pre-call was the danger of targeting a tax bracket. Now, you've talked about how Social Security leads itself to tax planning, and that leads itself to being a more holistic practice. And I think there are some advisors out there that see the tax brackets as sort of not the gospel, but like that's their guiding light. That's where everything kind of moves left or moves right, but it's based on that. And you believe that that's a dangerous game to play?
Yeah, absolutely. Because if you go into any of the IRS pubs and you look at, okay, where does the 12% ordinary income tax bracket end? Or where does the 22 end? Maybe I want to do Roth conversions for as much as I can while staying 24% or below. And if I just look up that tax bracket number and I do a Roth conversion up to that point, I'm going to step in a whole bunch of other things along the way. I'm going to cause taxable capital gains that might not have been taxable. I'm going to, or some portion of them might not have been taxable. I might cause net investment income tax. I might cause additional IRMA premiums. I might cause Social Security taxation that wouldn't have happened otherwise. I might cause ACA premium subsidy phase outs. Lots of different interactions happen outside the tax brackets that have a big impact on the tax bill.
What's your pitch to an advisor that doesn't think Social Security is sexy?
In the context of a retirement income plan, it's completely unique, right? I can't go buy a financial product that is equivalent to Social Security and create an outcome using anything other than Social Security. So to me, it makes it one of one. I'm going to deal with one of one uniquely. I'm going to build the rest of the retirement income plan around it to create tax efficiency. And when I do choose products, ultimately those products, the client is much more able to stick with that plan and get why is it that I'm doing what I'm doing, and be able to tell their friends, hey, I've got context. I know why I'm doing what I'm doing.
And you see that intentionality play out in real time. I couldn't have said it better myself, Joe. That's why I brought you in here to say it better for me. Thank you so much for taking the time. Tell the people real quick about Covisum and if they're a financial advisor, how that can be a resource for them.
Sure. Covisum.com is the easiest place to get started. We've got a host of both resources, content resources, to learn more about tax, learn more about Social Security, but also there are free trials of all of our different software tools on the site.
And if you're on our Impact Partnership YouTube channel and you're looking for more ways to grow your practice, you're in luck. House Rules with Alex House, Selling with Stories with Randy Cook. We've got some testimonials on there from current advisors that can kind of speak to all the different things that Impact does really, really well. It's just one more resource for financial advisors to utilize to grow their practice. So, Joe, once again, thank you so much for taking the time, and thank you for taking the time to enjoy this with us. Hopefully you picked up something. Like and subscribe. I've mentioned it a couple of times. I'll say it one more time. Please like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.